In this installation video, we're going to take a look at the Firestone air spring kit. This item is for the General Motor 3500 series pickup and Suburban. It will also work for Fords and Dodge. Today we're going to modify this Firestone air spring kit to fit in a 2004 Nissan Frontier pickup with a 4x4. But before we can perform this installation, there are necessary modifications that must be made, because the General Motor truck application is different from the Nissan truck application. So let's take a look at the Firestone air spring kit. As you can see on the box, the air spring is mounted next to the leaf spring. The air spring is attached to the solid axle and the frame rail. In the Nissan application, we cannot perform this installation because the frame rail sits right above the leaf spring. So we're going to attempt to install the air spring between the leaf spring and the frame rail. As it's shown in this application, the air spring is beside the leaf spring and it's still mounted to the frame rail and the solid axle. So let's take a look at inside the box at all the necessary items that's going to need modification. At the bottom of our airbag, it's a 6781. The weight capacity for this bag is 4,800 pounds. There's an Allen screw at the bottom of the bag. This attached the lower plate to the bag. At the top, we have our valve, our air valve, and our two mounting bolts. This is our air line. Leaf clamp bracket. We're not going to use this in our application. This is our upper bracket. This is going to need modify. This is our lower bracket. We're also going to need to modify this bracket. This is all the necessary hardware that comes in the kit. So we're going to make use of what we can, and what we don't have we're going to add to our installation. We also get the heat shield to protect the airbag from the exhaust pipe. In some application you will have the exhaust pipe very close to the airbag. Over time the bag will get burned. This will help us protect from heat. This is a complete bag I have assembled. This is practically what you will put together to put in the General Motor application. This section will go to your frame rail, and this section will go to the axle beside the leaf spring. In our application, we're going to mount the lower bracket on the leaf spring and the upper bracket to the frame rail. Now we're going to proceed with our necessary modification and installation. Now we're going to begin our modification on the lower bracket for the air spring. Before you perform any kind of modification, it is very important that you have eye protection. You use a goggle and also a pair of gloves. I'm going to use a goggle in this modification, but I'm going to stay away from the glove, because you can notice on the tool the shield is removed from it, so I could have good visual at cutting the lower bracket. So let's proceed. this is what we want from our stock. This still has to be modified some more. We have to bevel the edges, get rid of the sharp edge, and it's going to have to be shortened a little more. Now we're going to take a look at the Nissan Frontier rear suspension and the modification that's going to be required to install the airbag. But before we proceed, it is very important that you jack the vehicle up on the frame rail and you place the jack on the axle. Also place the tire under the vehicle in the event of the vehicle should slip and fall. When jacking the vehicle, always jack the vehicle on a solid concrete or asphalt ground. Never jack the vehicle on the grass, because the dirt may sink and cause the vehicle to move, and then you could have some serious problem. So now let's take a look at the requirement to install this airbag. This bracket is going to have to be mounted on top of the leaf spring. So we're going to have to cut it to length so it fits between the shackle bolt. That's the U-bolt. This is the shackle bolts. So we're going to fit this in between, and we're going to remove this bump stop. When we remove this bump stop, we're going to use the ear. We're going to cut the ear of the bump stop off and weld it to the end of the bracket. We're also going to remove this bumper from the frame rail and place this bracket in replacement of the bumper. Now we're going to remove this bump stop by removing the 4 bolts under these 2 shackles. Here's a look at the 4 bolt. Notice how the stud extends beyond the nut. We want to maintain the same position when we assemble the suspension with the air spring. So now we're going to proceed and remove this bump stop. And we're going to cut the edge off. We're going to weld the edge because you notice how the metal is folded and then the shackle clamps it to the leaf spring. So we're going to cut off the ear and weld it to the end of this bracket, which is going to replace the bump stop. We also have to cut the bracket to the length so it fits between the 2 shackle bolts, also known as a U-bolt. So let's proceed and remove the bump stop, U-clamp, shackle bolt, and the nut. Now once you remove the 4 shackle bolts, you could remove the shock and it will allow this plate to come down, and then we could remove our bump stop. This is our ABS brake. Now as we can see, you have a lot of room for mounting our bag. So let's continue to modify this bump stop onto this plate. So we're going to cut our steel plate from here to here, and we're going to weld the ear on to the end. And this plate is going to replace the bump stop. This is what we want. In this modification, we have cut the factory bump stop in half. This part we do not need, so we're going to discard this piece of metal. This is the piece that we need. Now we're going to have to enlarge this hole so we could have room to install this bolt to attach the air spring to the lower plate, this plate. What we're going to do is we're going to weld this bottom half of the bump stop to the plate. Also making sure the shackles can still be installed. Now we're going to go ahead and enlarge this hole before we weld the bottom of this bump stop to the plate. Perfect. Now we're going to clean our metal up because we're getting ready to weld. You want to make sure this bevel section of the plate is facing in because it's a tapered bolt. So let's clean up the metal. In the event you should weld, please make sure you protect your eye with the proper UV glass. once this metal cools off, we're going to apply some paint on it to prevent any rust in the future. And that's the complete of our lower bracket. Now we're in the process of installing the air spring. This is the upper bracket we have modified. We've also cut it down so this way it could be welded to the frame rail. We're also going to replace the ABS cable. We're going to bolt it back in position. Tighten up these 4 shackle bolts, and as you can see from the other side, we've installed the other airbag. So let's complete that on this side. This is the driver's side rear air spring installed. As you can notice, I weld the top to the frame. It's our bracket. Also our ABS line, electrical line, is bolted in position. And we've welded the bracket here on the frame rail.